Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation, it's the great debate, but it can only be either of those if you join in. Above all, I need your telephone calls. The number is 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0 or no one will understand either of us, and I'll have to move swiftly on. You can also SMS the show, and it comes up here if it's good enough on the comment wall. The number for SMS is 447800008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk, and that too will end up there, as will the best of the tweets. You can tweet me at comment_PressTV. Now, as the Turkish armed forces, a NATO member, a heavily armed regional superpower, peers through the wire fence at the massacre impending in Kobani in the north of Syria, where gallant, heroic liberation fighters of the YPG are resisting the advance of the fanatic Takfiri savages of ISIL, as Turkey looks through the fence and refuses not only to lift a finger to come to the aid of the people just 300 meters away, but they are stopping, if necessary, killing people in Turkey who wish to get across the border to the aid of their compatriots. It is just about as low as it can get. But I'm asking a bigger question. To what extent is Turkey responsible for ISIL, for the Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the official Al-Qaeda affiliate, and the other myriad, hundreds, maybe now thousands of smaller fanatic savage groups who are busily ripping Syria apart? To what extent is Turkey responsible for all of this? Well, let me tell you that I was once an admirer of now President Erdogan. I thought he was, for a time, the man who embodied the synthesis between democracy and Islam. I felt that he could blaze a trail that others in the region might follow. He had a foreign policy of no problems with the neighbours, and now he has a foreign policy of problems with every neighbour. He has the blood of 200,000 Syrians on his hands. He didn't kill them himself, but he opened his border, 500 miles of border, so that every last fanatic in the world, from Milton Keynes to Yemen, to Tunisia, to Libya, to Pakistan, to Bangladesh, he opened his borders for people who wanted to come to Syria and destroy it, to destroy churches, to destroy convents and monasteries, to massacre religious and ethnic minorities, to terrorize women, to crucify people, to cut off people's heads, to cut open their chests and eat their hearts and film themselves whilst doing it. Erdogan and Turkey are responsible for that. And because Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States of America, is a rather simple-minded chap, sometimes when they let him out and allow him access to a microphone, he tells the truth, inconvenient, uncomfortable though that truth may be. And at Harvard University, just the other day, Joe Biden spoke that truth. He said that Turkey had gone too far in allowing these fanatics not only to cross the border, but to cross weapons across the border, to cross money across the border. He has allowed the stolen oil from Syria to be sold in Turkey, some of it unbelievably ending up fueling Israeli warplanes as they rain down death and destruction on the people of Palestine trapped in the concentration camp called Gaza. That's a lot of responsibility. Now, Turkey is very clear about two things at this current juncture. First, that it does not wish to lift a finger to help Kurdish people in Kobani, or the Arabic name for the same town, Ain al-Arab. He does not wish to lift a finger because he does not want the Kurdish fighters to be responsible for a victory over his protégés in ISIL. He may be afraid of ISIL, but he's more afraid of the Kurdish people and their fighting forces. The YPG, a youth section of the PKK, the Kurdish militant left-wing group that has been struggling for Kurdish rights inside Turkey for 30 years. Now, that's one of the things he's sure about. The second is even more dangerous in global terms. Erdogan is saying that he will not lift a finger against ISIL, his protégés, unless there is a no-fly zone imposed by NATO, just like the one that was such a spiffing success in Libya and in Iraq, for that matter, in decades gone by. And second, that he is permitted to invade Syria and set up what he calls a buffer zone, but what I call the annexation of part of the Syrian Arab Republic. The government in Damascus has declared that any such invasion by Turkey would be an act of war, as indeed it would be. And it would be an act of war not just against Syria, but against Syria's allies, who include Iran, Russia, and China. It would be an act of war, therefore, by a NATO member against Russia. Think about that one. So is Turkey responsible for ISIL? Yes. They're not identical ideologically, of course. ISIL is an extreme as it's possible to imagine, an extreme variant of Erdogan's Islamist politics. So I'm not saying that Erdogan equals ISIL. But Erdogan, in order to bring down Bashar al-Assad in Damascus, was ready to facilitate the infiltration of tens of thousands, scores of thousands of foreign fighters and fanatics of all kinds to tear apart his neighbour. No problems with the neighbours. What a long time ago that seems to be. The second question I'm asking is what steps the UK should take to help the Palestinians. Well, I've been fighting for that one for 40 years. And what we should do to help the Palestinians is the very opposite of what we currently do. We should stop treating Israel as some kind of legitimate, even friendly state, deserving of the red carpet whenever their murderous leaders come to town. Britain changed the law so that these murderous leaders could never have an arrest warrant issued against them in Britain for the war crimes and the crimes against humanity that they are responsible for. We should stop treating Israel as if it were a member of the European Union. It is not. It's not in Europe, and it has nothing in common with European social democratic values, which is what we are told are the values underpinning the European Union. Now, there's a big vote coming up in Parliament next week. Many good people are rallying behind the call for a yes vote in Parliament to a motion which says this. Forgive me if I get a word or two wrong, because I'm quoting it from my head. That this House recognises a Palestinian state alongside Israel. I cannot support that motion. I know that many good people will. Actually, I hope it passes, because the amendment to it is one tabled by the Zionist dead-enders, the rear guard, fighting a rear guard action in Parliament in defence of Israel. But I cannot support it. I cannot support a Palestinian state alongside Israel. You know that the whole territory of Israel-Palestine is smaller than a single park in South Africa. The topography, demography, political geography of that small territory can no longer sustain a two-state solution, which in any case is no solution at all, because it leaves outside millions of Palestinian refugees whom I am pledged until my last breath to fight for their right to return. I don't recognize Israel. I will not put my name to a motion which recognizes Israel, especially a motion which has not a word, sentence, comma about what the borders of this so-called Israel that we're recognizing in this motion actually is. Is it the Israel of 1948? Is it the Israel of 1967? The Israel of 1973, 78, 82? Is it the Israel that includes the occupied Golan Heights? Is it the Israel that includes the occupied Sheba farms taken from Lebanon and held these last decades? Is it the Israel that includes occupied Jerusalem? No thanks. I cannot, in conscience, append my name to such a motion. So when this motion goes to the vote on Monday, it will not have my support. But we'll hear what the viewers think. Vahid is in Glasgow. Let's hear from Vahid. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, George.
Walaikum salam. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to speak to you for the first time, despite my many attempts in the past.
Okay, welcome. I like your Glasgow accent.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Galloway. I believe there should be a 5-step strategy to deal with the Israel-Palestine issue.
Okay, go on.
I think the United Kingdom has to adopt a policy, and I think you would share many of my points. Very quickly, I will outline what the 5 points I believe are that should be implemented. Number one, I believe that we should end all economical trade with Israel. And that includes any pending previous current contracts. We should not be honoured to uphold those contracts. And number two, I believe we should impose unilateral sanctions on Israel. And that includes imposing sanctions and penalties on corporations, persons, or private companies who trade with Israel. I think point three should be we should revoke all dual Israeli-UK citizenships, passports, and we should investigate potential war crimes committed by IDF soldiers who are also UK citizens. I think number four should be all states and all corporations and all private investors who have created Israel, this apartheid system, they should be held liable. And what I mean by held liable, I don't mean so much so it's prosecuted, because in the ideal world, that is what we would like to see, but it's probably not going to happen. What I think should then happen is there should be a compensation given to Israel, from Israel and its donors, particularly private corporations that fund Israel. They should pay the Palestinians who have suffered as a result of this treacherous system. And the last thing, which I would be very reserved on promoting, but I think it's a long time coming. I think it's about time that the world, especially Israel's major donors, should create a joint military force which shall enter Palestine solely to protect the Palestinians.
Well, that's a very radical programme, and food for thought and discussion for the rest of the show, Vahid. There are many problems associated with it, but I can only use the time available to deal with one, and it's your last one. There's already enough guns, there's already enough weapons in the tiny land of Israel, Palestine, Palestine, Israel. Unfortunately, Western countries, including our own, helped Israel to become a nuclear-armed superpower. So no one can invade it in the way that you describe. My position is in one way more radical than you, and in one way less radical. It seems to me that the people living there have no alternative but to live together as equal citizens under the law. One man, one woman, one vote. One state called Israel-Palestine or Palestine-Israel, according to your taste, with one man, one woman, one vote, one government, one constitution, which guarantees the religious, civil, political and other rights of all the communities living there. In Lebanon, they have such a constitution. In Palestine, Israel, we could also have such a constitution. I believe that the attempt to carve out a Bantustan state between the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem is doomed. I did support the Oslo Agreement 20 years ago when it was signed. It may well have been wrong of me to do so, but of one thing I'm certain, and that is that the Oslo Agreement is stone dead, and any attempt 20 years late by the British Parliament to vote it back into existence is similarly doomed. Vahid in Glasgow, thanks for an excellent call. Mehdi is in the UK also. What steps should the UK take to help the Palestinians, Mehdi?
Is it you are saying as a public, British people, or the government? I didn't understand that.
Well, both. Give us your views on both.
Well, government, I don't think so. At this moment, they're going to do anything. But we need a proper worldwide. You know, letter has to be sent as a public letter sent to United Nations. Not email, letter. If this letter gets to United Nations, it's like a bomb dropping on Israel. That's what I believe.
You think every member of the public should write an actual letter? Yeah?
Letter to the United Nations.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I agree with you. Getting letters is much more powerful than getting emails.
Yeah,
I speak as someone...
They have to carry the letter, you know, publicly.
Yeah. And what should the letter say, Mehdi?
You know, we can push the United Nations for the fact, you know, so this Israel does everything and America really destroying the world. And then what kind of United Nations we have got in this world?
Well, that's a bigger question. Maybe we should put that on the agenda. The United Nations may be one of the most ineffective institutions on the entire planet, but it's quite an expensive one, and many people still have illusions in it. For me, the United Nations is otiose, redundant. It's meaningless. Its major powers, 3 out of the 5 of them, constantly, and they're planning to do it again in Syria, decide that if something cannot pass in the Security Council, they'll step outside and do it themselves, which makes a mockery of international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and any meaningful role for the United Nations itself. Mehdi, thanks for the call. Two interesting British calls to start us off. We're talking about Turkey in ISIL. We're talking about Palestine and the UK. Mo is on the line from the UK on the Palestine question. Mo, welcome.
Hi, George.
Welcome to the show. Go ahead, sir.
George, Palestine, the Kurdish issue, and Turkey are all tied in.
Yeah.
And I'll explain how.
Go on.
The Turks will not defend Kobani because they don't want, obviously, as you correctly said, the Kurds to become stronger. So the Turks will not defend Kobani. But Mossad and U.S. Special Forces have been in the Iraqi Kurdistan since 1991.
They have.
If you remember the oil for food.
They have.
They've been there training the Kurds and egging them on to seek independence. The whole idea is to topple Assad. And once Assad is toppled, there'll be no defender of Palestine left because Hezbollah will be weakened. And then Israel can carry out its genocide of Palestinians. So there is no solution for Palestine. So this vote in Parliament next week is really nothing. The whole plan is once Assad falls, Hezbollah is weakened, the Palestinians have no chance of surviving in that land that is now called Israel. And this is not a...
Go on.
This is not an anti-Semite comment. I'm pro-Semite because all the Palestinians are Semites. The Ashkenazi Jews and the Russian Jews are not Semites. So we cannot be called anti-Semites about this.
Well, you know, I tend to disregard these kind of classifications. I disregard the false equation, the false synonym of Zionism and Judaism. These two things have nothing to do with each other. It's true that most Jews are Zionists, but it's also true that most Zionists are not Jews. And many Zionists are, in fact, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. And indeed, Balfour himself, who gave in his infamous declaration this land of Palestine away to the Zionists, was himself a notorious anti-Semite. You're right in what you say about Israel's long, deep involvement with the Iraqi Kurds. The Kurds have been used and abused, picked up, put back on and off the shelf by many big powers in the region for a very long time. The truth is, the Kurdish people are 40 million strong, and they have no national state. And somebody, somewhere, has to come up with a plan to give self-determination to the Kurdish people. They deserve that. They're entitled to that, and they'll fight for it as long as they don't have it. Self-determination does not necessarily mean breaking up states, creating new states. New forms, other forms of association are possible, and I myself would be strongly in favour of them. But what we can't do is what Jeffrey Archer tried to do back in '91, argue that there are good Kurds and bad Kurds. He meant that the good Kurds were in Iraq fighting Saddam Hussein. The bad Kurds were in Turkey fighting our NATO ally. He was a fool for saying that. We would be foolish to make the same mistake in reverse. People have national rights, and the Kurdish people have national rights. And those heroes in Kobani that are facing these savages, many of them women fighters, deserve the support of every right-thinking person in the world. Now, I've got to go for a short news bulletin. Just 3 minutes. Don't go away. I'll be back, God willing. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. We're talking about Turkey and the level of its responsibility for ISIL, and asking what steps the UK should take to help the Palestinians. On that latter point, Shahid in London is on the line. Shahid, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, George.
Walaikum salam, welcome.
Well, I just would like to say, first of all, that Allah blessed me with a beautiful baby girl. So recently I had a baby girl.
MashaAllah, Mabruk, congratulations.
Thank you very much. And every time when I look at my baby girl, now, especially when I look in, do some research about Palestine and look on YouTube and everything, and I see the heartbroken children, it makes me even more sad that they're suffering.
Yeah.
So I urge all the fathers like me, I'm going to teach my child about the beautiful land of Palestine. And I urge every father to teach their children about this land so that we never, ever, ever forget Palestine.
Ameen. Ameen.
Ameen. Inshallah. Also, George, I urge all the people of the world for them to boycott Israel as much as possible in every way we can. I'm not just talking about boycotting their products. I'm talking about anything associated with Israel. We should try to avoid that and really, really isolate Israel in such a way where they have no choice. Like you said, George, the people, they need rights. There can't be one specific road for a Jewish person and then all the Muslims has to go around the long way. No. All the roads, all the land, all the sea, everything in the land of Palestine, everyone has to have equal rights. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish, doesn't matter if you're Muslim. Everyone has to have equal rights. That's what I say, George.
God bless you and your family, Shahid. Another wonderful call from Shahid in London. It is about rights. You see, for decades, many decades now, millions of Palestinians have been living under military occupation in Palestine. The people living in 1948 Palestine are second or third class citizens of what they call Israel. Millions more are living with no rights at all, with no class, not fourth, fifth or 10th class, no rights of any kind, no votes, no rights, no place to call their own. And that's what needs to be dealt with. Not boundaries or states or flags, but the equal right of every person there or with a right to be there. And that right to be there is a right indissoluble, inalienable, cannot be changed, cannot be sold, cannot be negotiated away of every Palestinian refugee to return to their home. That's what I stand for. Sammy's in the UK, same subject. Sammy, welcome.
Welcome, George.
Welcome. Go ahead, sir.
I'll talk about Palestine. I was there. I was actually there this time last year.
Oh yeah.
And I will say that to the Palestinians, you are a British hero, George. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think the ways the UK can help. We haven't got confidence in the government. What's his name? Miliband the other day saying that he was a Zionist.
Yeah, it's the first time any Labour leader has ever made such a declaration. The Miliband declaration.
Doesn't it make you? If I was dead, I'd turn in my grave. But
yeah,
I think what we need to do is obviously, through social media, we need to name and shame Zionists. We need to make it a dirty word. Like socialist in America is a dirty word. We need to make Zionist a dirty word, like extremist. We need to name and shame these IDF people that donate to the IDF, you know, people like Simon Cowell.
Sammy, we should call them the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Force. They're not a defense. They're not a defense force at all.
Yeah. So you get people like Simon Cowell who are not only killing music, they're killing Arab children as well.
Good point.
But yeah, so I think, you know, because we can't rely on this government. We need to, you know, we need more people like you, brother, who are telling the truth. You know, there's few and far between, but we need to grow and, you know.
Well, I can tell you this, Sammy. I've been fighting this cause in Britain since the middle 1970s, exactly, midsummer of 1975. And if I measure the support for Palestine in Britain in 1975 and compare it with the support for Palestine in Britain now, all these years later, well, it's incomparable, really. Everybody who has any brain in their head knows that the Palestinians have suffered a great injustice, and secondly, that unless that injustice is addressed, there will be no peace, no justice, no peace. Anybody with any sense already knows that. Sammy, thanks for the call and your lovely words. Niall's in Ireland, always worth hearing. Is Turkey responsible for ISIL, Niall?
I think they are, George. I think Turkey has a huge responsibility in the growth, the development, and the arming of ISIL over the last couple of years since they came into being. Because, George, as you know, Turkey has facilitated the transit of arms and men from its own territory into Syria, George, you know, with the goal of toppling an Arab secular government, that of President Assad. Because thing is, George, you know, you have to look at who's in power in Turkey. You know, you have the AKP of Erdogan, and the thing about it is he's an Islamist. The AKP and the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamists with ISIL, they're all together. They're all one side of, or two sides, pretty much of the same coin. You know, in that regard. And secondly, is the whole geopolitical aspect of it, in that Turkey is playing a role in Syrian Kurdistan, a very similar role to what the Soviets did in 1944 with the Polish Home Army. As you know, the Soviets allowed the Polish Home Army to be defeated by the Nazis. And afterwards then they came in and they defeated the Nazis and liberated the Polish territory. But see, the thing about it is, George, I think Erdogan has, his bluff has been called by the West. But I don't think he can actually afford to go into Syria, because he's gutted his own army of a lot of his capable generals, you know, in that regard. And I think his bluff has been called and he's completely croaked it.
Well, that's a very comprehensive tour de horizon, Niall. I don't have time to deal with all of it. It was all very interesting. I think you're onto something about the bluff being called. First of all, a very substantial proportion of the Turkish population opposes Erdogan's policy towards Syria. First of all, there are 20% of Turkey are Kurdish people. And then there's the Alevi or Alawi people who live in the south of Turkey, getting on close to the Syrian border. Almost to a man, both of these sections oppose Erdogan's policy towards Turkey, towards Syria. Then there is the left in Turkey, which opposes Erdogan's policy towards Syria. Then there is the right, the nationalists, who are, as you indicate, still very influential in the army. There are many Turkish generals in jail for plotting against Erdogan. The deep state in Turkey is hostile to Erdogan and may very well take any opportunity to topple him. And a military humiliation, a political humiliation is already on the table, staring them in the face, but a military humiliation in Syria might be the last straw for Erdogan, which may be why he's taking so long to make up his mind whether or not to take it. And Niall, thanks for that great call. Stephen is in the UK on the same subject. Stephen, welcome.
Hello, George.
Yes, hello there. Go ahead.
Well, I'm very much pro-Palestine, but the call's regarding the ISIS situation, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's a brief one, really. I'd just like to ask you, I mean, do you get tired of being right? I mean, I remember this time last year, you as good as predicted this. They've made a monster, as ever. You were right yet again. I mean, it must be frustrating for you. Do you get that recognition from your peers? I mean, I'm in Brighton, but I'm from Crawley. I email my MP, Henry Smith, as much as I can, but you never know whether they're just paying you lip service or whether they're genuine with their responses to the emails. But really, you know, it's just credit to you. Why are you the only one who's actually giving these issues the time that they warrant?
Well, thanks, Stephen. I'd hazard a guess about Henry Smith, except I've never heard of him. I don't know who he is, so I can't tell you whether he's being sincere in what he says to you or not. That's probably my fault rather than his. But tired of being right and not being paid attention to would be more accurate. It's the case that millions of us were right. Millions and millions of us knew that when Bush and Blair invaded Iraq, occupied it, atomized it, balkanized it, destroyed it, sectarianized it, that it would come to this. And so on behalf of those millions, I'm frustrated, because we who don't have the benefit of sitting in ministries, in government, who don't have intelligence services reporting to us, who don't have armies of flunkies, civil servants and experts advising us on what's what. We who have none of these things were right, and those with all of those things and more are wrong over and over and over again. Stephen, thanks for recognizing it. Let's go to Oslo. Hassan is in Oslo in Norway. Hassan, go ahead, sir.
Greeting, Mr. Galloway.
Good evening, sir. Welcome. Go ahead.
Very interesting. Thank you, sir. I was just going to comment something regarding Palestine. I feel that the issue you're raising is an honorable one regarding one man, one vote. But I feel that the Jews won't honor that. I don't think I think they feel that they can do whatever they want, and there's no accountability. So
well, but that's true. That's true of both. You see, Hassan, this is often said to me. Well, the Zionists in Israel will never agree to one democratic state, but they'll never agree to two states either, at least not two meaningful states. 20 years ago, they signed Oslo from your country, and indeed you're calling me from Oslo. 21 years ago, they signed this Oslo agreement. Not one jot or tittle, not one scintilla, not one dot or comma has been implemented. And another 20, 40, 60 years from now, neither will it have been implemented. Meanwhile, the small piece of territory, 23% of Palestine, which was designated as the Palestinian state, has been paved over with apartheid walls, with settlements, with military roads. It has been crisscrossed with checkpoints, hundreds and hundreds of checkpoints. And in 20, 40, 60 years, there won't be any land available for a separate Palestinian state, which would in any case, even if it were created tomorrow, be non-contiguous, would not be joined. Gaza is not connected to the West Bank. Jerusalem, the holy city, has been annexed. Golan has been annexed. Sheba Farms is occupied. Exactly where is this border, this boundary going to be? And above all, how do the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon Hundreds of thousands of them fit into this picture, Hassan.
I agree with you totally, Mr. Galloway. I agree with you. My point is that I think what we could do is that if we do like something like Gandhi, where we did a day where people, the whole world sit down or do something, you know, which can make a change.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
From there.
Not a bad idea. Hassan, thanks for the call. Hussein is in Iran, wants to talk about Turkey. Hussein, welcome.
Hello, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Good to hear from you. Go ahead.
Okay. I am one or two comments about Erdogan and his policies about ISIL and Syria.
Yeah.
Basically, Erdogan came to the power as an Islamic figure. And we will all have some hopes about that another countries with the Islamic State will make a difference in the situation of the regional powers. But I think the hunger of the Erdogan to lead the Islamic world take him to the wrong ways.
Well, it hasn't worked out for him, Hussein. He's standing in a very isolated position today. He's not the leader of anybody. He's not even the leader of much of Turkey, as you can see on this screen.
Yes, sir, exactly. But when he came to the power, he considered himself as an Islamic figure, and we can consider Turkey as a power in the regional countries.
Yeah. Well, Turkey is a great state. Turkey is a great nation. It has the right.
Exactly.
It has the right to play an important role in the region, but the Turks cannot be the leaders of the Arabs. The Turks cannot be the leaders of the Iranians.
Exactly, sir. That's why I think Erdogan's interest to take the Iran place in the leading country as Islamic power, take him to the wrong places, like ISIL and like that things. Yeah. I think Turkey has greater role than United States itself in the creating of ISIL and its power in the regional, in the Syria and its operation in the Syria. United States is far away from the Syria, and they cannot have any effective role in Syria themselves. So they hired the Turkey as an old plan they implemented in Pakistan when they created Taliban to oppose Russia.
Well, Hussein, you're onto something there. I was just saying to some of my colleagues before the show that Turkey is playing the same role vis-à-vis Syria as Pakistan played in the 1980s vis-à-vis Afghanistan. It was the indispensable base camp for what became the Taliban, what became Al-Qaeda. The Saudis and others paid the money. The British and the Americans gave the diplomatic, political and media support, but none of it could have happened but for Pakistan being used as a base camp. Turkey is now the base camp for Takfiri fanaticism, which has killed so many people and caused so much damage in Syria, now in Iraq, and now cascading around the region and in danger of blowing back into Turkey, into Saudi Arabia and other powers responsible for the creation of this mentality in the first place. Hussein, good call, thanks. Let me go back to England, to Brighton, talk to Jay on the same subject. Jay, welcome.
Hi, Mr. Galloway. How are you doing?
Yes, by the grace of God, I'm good. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Basically, I just want to say on the Turkey issue, I mean, like what we see in Kobani, as a Kurdish person, it's nothing different we haven't seen in the last 100 years what Turks doing to the Kurdish people. I mean, for the last past 100 years, see what the Turks have done. The genocide, killing, I mean, it's a few years ago, they didn't let the Kurdish people in Turkey speak their own languages. Yeah. There's nothing different. And basically what they're trying to do, they're trying to Kobani to fail. Yeah, they don't have a gun. I have a brother in front line who's a Peshmerga, who's fighting against ISIS. Honest to God, I'm not lying to you. You see, we have to buy our own bullet because the government doesn't provide. The Kurdish regional government, they don't have enough bullet or weapons to give it to them. And the Iraqi government is not helping either by stopping their budget from Baghdad. And the Turkish, there's nothing changed for the Kurd or for anyone. I think Turkey is trying to show their power, trying to dominate Iran and other countries around their other neighbor, like Syria and Iraq or Iran. But they can't do that. Whenever they could control the Kurdish people in their own country, that they have all the power, they can do whatever they want. They have done it in the past. Then they can go to Iran and Iraq or Syria. At the end, I just want to ask you one question. This question is to you, Mr. Galloway. Do you think the Kurdish people more suffered from the barbarian Arab and the Turk, the one who's done genocide against Kurds, or the Palestinians have more suffered from the Zionists? Thank you very much.
Well, both have suffered. Both have national rights. Both are the victims of colonialism and imperialism. The Palestinian people are the victims of the same forces that created the statelessness of now 40 million Kurdish people. It's a great pity that in Iraq especially, the Kurdish political organizations have allowed themselves to be used by American imperialism, by Zionism, by Israel. It's a big shame that some of the political leaders in Iraqi Kurdistan have actually transported oil through pipelines in Turkey to Israel to fuel their attack on the Palestinians. It's time for principle on this question of the Kurds. It's time for the left and progressive people in the West and elsewhere to act in a principled way in relation to Kurdish rights. But it's equally time for the Kurds to behave in a principled way, to eschew the very imperialist, Zionist and colonial forces that helped create the plight which they themselves now are suffering. I say at the end of the show, as I said at the beginning of the show, the defenders of Kobani are amongst the most heroic fighters for freedom and against reaction that I have ever seen. And the fact that they have been left alone to stand against these savages is a mark of shame on everyone responsible for it. It's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you. If so, come back next week.
Just make sure the your television volume's set to 0. So 0, 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect me through the phone number and then we'll call you back. Can I have your telephone number? Okay, so I'll then call you back to make sure your television volume is turned down to 0.